Cold pavement, a cardboard sign shaking in tired hands. $10 for a German Shepherd no one wants to see. People pass like the street itself has learned to look away. The dog doesn't whine, doesn't chase hope. He sits close to the old man, ribs showing eyes steady, guarding what little dignity remains. Waiting, not for pity, for the one who won't walk past. Then a Navy SEAL stops. He recognizes that look, the quiet loyalty the damage carried without complaint. He doesn't argue the price, he doesn't ask questions. He takes the dog home. And that single choice doesn't just save a life, it turns a broken German Shepherd into the guardian of an entire neighborhood, and gives a wounded soldier a reason to stay. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more true heart stories. Snow drifted sideways through downtown Spokane, Washington, thin and sharp, turning the late afternoon into a pale, biting blur where breath showed before words ever could. Logan Pierce moved through the cold with practiced economy shoulders squared beneath a dark wool coat that failed to hide the build shaped by years of military discipline. At 38, Logan was tall, a little over 6 feet broad across the chest, but lean through the waist, the kind of strength earned rather than displayed. His face was angular, defined by a strong jaw and faint scars near the right eyebrow. Old, clean lines from a life that once demanded silence and speed. His hair, dark brown with the first hints of gray at the temples, was cut short, regulation out of habit rather than necessity. Clean-shaven, his expression carried a stillness often mistaken for calm, though beneath it lived a constant, controlled vigilance shaped by combat deployments he rarely spoke about and never forgot. He had learned to notice what others missed. That was why the cardboard sign caught him. Near the bus station, where the snow turned gray from foot traffic and exhaust, an old man sat on an overturned milk crate. He was small and bent, perhaps late 60s or early 70s, wrapped in layers that no longer pretended to match. His name, Logan would soon learn, was Frank Dawson. Frank's frame was thin to the point of fragility, shoulders sloped inward as if apologizing to the world. A ragged beard, white and yellowed with age, clung unevenly to his jaw, and deep lines carved his face into a permanent look of tired patience. His hands were bare despite the cold, red, swollen and cracked, resting on a piece of cardboard weighted down by a stone. Written in shaky black marker were 3 words, German Shepherd. $10. At Frank's feet lay the dog. The German Shepherd was a young adult, perhaps 2 or 3 years old, male, large but frighteningly underweight. His coat, once rich black and tan, hung dull and patchy along his ribs. The dog's ears were upright but lacked tension, and his tail lay still against the icy concrete. Yet his eyes, amber and steady, tracked every movement with quiet intelligence. He did not beg. He did not whine. He sat angled subtly toward the old man, positioning himself as a barrier between Frank and the indifferent crowd, a posture born not of training, but instinct. Logan felt his chest tighten at the sight. People passed without slowing. Some glanced at the sign and looked away. Others pretended not to see it at all. Logan had seen this kind of avoidance before overseas, and at home the human instinct to step around suffering rather than through it. He stopped. Frank noticed him immediately, lifting his chin with a dignity that felt almost defiant. "Good dog," Frank said softly, his voice rough from cold and restraint rather than drink. "Name's Rex. He's gentle, smart, just needs more than I got." Frank's eyes were pale blue, faded but alert, watching Logan closely without pleading. He wasn't asking for pity. He was asking for honesty. Logan crouched slowly, careful not to startle the dog. Rex didn't move, but his ears angled forward slightly, assessing. Logan recognized that look, the same look men wore when deciding whether to trust a stranger with their life. "You're selling him," Logan said, voice low, steady. Frank nodded once. "Selling him a chance." There was no shame in the words, only exhaustion. "I'd keep him if love was enough. But winter don't take love as payment." Logan reached into his wallet and pulled out a bill, then another, folding them together. He placed the money gently into Frank's trembling hand. "This is more than 10, he said. Frank frowned. "I didn't ask." "I know," Logan interrupted quietly. "I'm not buying him because he's cheap. I'm buying him because he matters." He paused, then added, "And so do you." Before Frank could respond, Logan set a steaming cup of soup from the nearby stand beside him, the smell rising like a small mercy. Rex finally moved, standing slowly despite the stiffness in his legs. He stepped closer to Logan, sniffed once, then sat again closer this time. Logan slipped off his gloves and rested his bare hand near Rex's chest, not touching yet, letting the dog decide. After a long second, Rex leaned forward, pressing his weight lightly against Logan's knee. Something inside Logan shifted. He hadn't planned for that. He hadn't planned for anything at all. As snow continued to fall, Logan looped a spare leash around Rex's neck and helped Frank to his feet. "There's a shelter 2 blocks east," Logan said. "Hot meals, beds. I'll walk you there." Frank's eyes glistened, but he nodded, swallowing hard. They parted at the shelter doors. Rex looked back, once ears flicking, then followed Logan without resistance. Logan didn't look back. He knew better than to test the strength of moments like this. That night, as they walked toward Logan's quiet neighborhood, he realized something he hadn't felt in years. This wasn't a rescue mission. It was an invitation to trust, to heal, to stay. And neither of them knew yet how much would change because of it. Morning came quietly to Logan Pierce's neighborhood, a low Spokane winter sun pressing pale light through bare branches, and across the narrow street where tire tracks froze into thin blue shadows. Inside the small house, warmth hummed steadily from old radiators, a controlled, dependable heat that Logan had learned to rely on the way other men relied on prayer. He stood in the kitchen in a fitted gray thermal shirt, sleeves pushed to his forearms, revealing faint scars that crossed his skin like unfinished sentences. Sleep had come in fragments. It always did. He moved now with deliberate care, aware of every sound, every shift of weight, as if the walls themselves were still strangers. Behind him, Rex lay on a folded blanket near the heater, his long body stretched cautiously, head lifted, but resting amber eyes following Logan's movements, without fear, without trust, either just attention. The dog looked marginally better, already the stiffness in his posture easing with warmth, though the sharp lines of his ribs were still visible beneath his coat. Logan knelt slowly, setting a metal bowl on the floor. The smell of warm food filled the room. Rex rose but did not rush forward. He waited, ears slightly back, a habit learned from a world where moving too quickly had consequences. Logan noticed. He always noticed. "It's yours," he said quietly, voice even uncommanding. After a moment, Rex stepped forward and ate, measured and careful, pausing between bites to glance up as if confirming that the meal would not vanish. Logan leaned back against the counter, arms crossed loosely, watching with a strange mix of relief and unease. Responsibility settled in his chest like a weight he hadn't agreed to carry, but now refused to set down. A knock came mid-morning, 3 soft taps hesitant. Logan stiffened out of reflex before he exhaled and crossed the room. On the porch stood Sarah Mitchell, his next-door neighbor. She was in her early 40s, average height, with a slender build that suggested quiet endurance rather than fragility. Her brown hair was pulled into a loose braid over one shoulder, already dusted with snow, and her pale skin held the pink flush of cold. Sarah's eyes were warm, observant, the kind that noticed emotional weather as easily as the real thing. She wore a thick, cream-colored coat and held a small paper bag to her chest, like a peace offering. "I saw you come in late," she said gently. "Thought you might need this." She glanced past Logan, her gaze landing on Rex. A smile touched her mouth, careful not to startle. And maybe him too. Logan accepted the bag without ceremony. "Thank you," he said. He meant it. Sarah's presence had always been like that, unassuming, steady. She was a widow. He knew her husband lost to a logging accident years back, a grief that had softened her rather than hardened her. She never pried, never asked about his past, but she remembered details: trash days, storm warnings when his porch light burned late. Rex stepped closer, curious. Sarah crouched, extending her hand, palm down, letting him decide. After a brief sniff, Rex's tail gave a single, uncertain sway. Sarah laughed softly, the sound light enough not to bruise the moment. "He's got manners," she said. Later that afternoon, Logan drove Rex to the veterinary clinic on Monroe Street. Dr. Emily Carter met them at the door, a woman in her mid-50s with iron-gray hair pulled into a practical bun and a posture shaped by decades of standing her ground. Tall and broad-shouldered, she moved with confidence, her hands gentle but efficient. She listened more than she spoke, eyes sharp behind thin-framed glasses, as she examined Rex. "Malnourished, mild joint inflammation, old abrasions," she said calmly. "Nothing that can't be helped with time and care." She looked at Logan, then assessing him as much as the dog. "He's lucky," she added. Logan nodded once, though the word felt heavier than luck. Back home by evening, Rex followed Logan room to room, not underfoot, but always aware. When a passing truck backfired outside Logan's shoulders, locked breath catching for a split second before he forced it down. Rex reacted faster, stepping between Logan and the window stance, firm ears forward. The dog did not bark. He simply stood guard. Logan noticed the grounding effect immediately, the way the tension ebbed without instruction. He rested a hand lightly against Rex's shoulder, feeling solid warmth beneath his palm. "Easy," he murmured. Whether he meant the dog or himself, he wasn't sure. As night settled, Logan sat at the small kitchen table, paperwork spread out, vet receipts, adoption forms, things that made this real. Rex curled at his feet, finally asleep, breath slow and steady. Logan watched him, the steady rise and fall, and understood something he hadn't allowed himself to name before. This wasn't charity. It was partnership. Outside, snow continued to fall, quiet and persistent, reshaping the world inch by inch. Inside, a house that had once held only discipline and silence began almost imperceptibly to learn how to breathe. Late winter loosened its grip on Spokane in small, deceptive ways. Snow still lined the sidewalks in tired gray banks, but the air carried hints of thaw, a damp softness that made the neighborhood feel watchful, as if waiting to see what would survive the season. Logan Pierce had settled into a rhythm he hadn't planned. Mornings began early as they always had, but now they included Rex. The German Shepherd's coat had begun to regain its sheen, black, deepening along his back, tan brightening at his legs and chest. At nearly 3 years old, Rex was large, muscular. Beneath the once visible ribs, his movements growing fluid again. He walked beside Logan with a natural heel, not trained yet, but choosing alignment. Logan noticed how Rex matched his pace without command, slowing when Logan slowed, stopping when he stopped. It stirred something familiar in Logan's chest, a memory of moving in formation, of belonging to something without needing to speak. Their walks drew attention. Children paused their games. Neighbors nodded more often. Logan wasn't used to being seen, but Rex made invisibility impossible. One afternoon, as they passed the corner house, a voice called out, "Hey, soldier!" Logan turned to see Mark Reynolds, a man in his early 50s with a stocky build and a salt-and-pepper beard that framed a perpetually serious mouth. Mark wore a flannel jacket stretched tight at the shoulders, the uniform of a man who'd spent his life doing physical work. A retired firefighter, Mark carried himself with blunt confidence and a protective instinct sharpened by years of emergency calls. "That your dog?" he asked, crouching slightly. Rex paused, ears forward, evaluating. Logan nodded. "His name's Rex." Mark whistled low. "He's got the look," he said. "The kind that doesn't scare trouble, just convinces it to go elsewhere." The moment came later that week, on a quiet afternoon when the street hummed with ordinary life. Logan was repairing a loose fence panel when Rex stiffened, head snapping toward the sound of raised voices 2 houses down. Logan heard it, then a sharp argument, panic bleeding into anger. Rex was already moving, not running wild, but purposeful. Logan followed, heart, accelerating instincts awake. At the curb stood Ethan Cole, a young man in his mid-20s, tall but thin, his dark hair falling messily into his eyes. His face was flushed, jaw clenched, hands shaking with adrenaline. In front of him, pressed back against a parked car, was Mrs. Helen Brooks, a woman in her late 70s, small and frail, her silver hair tucked beneath a wool hat. She clutched a grocery bag torn at the seam, oranges rolling uselessly at her feet. Ethan wasn't armed, but his agitation was dangerous enough. Rex placed himself between them without hesitation, body squared, posture calm but immovable. He didn't bark, he didn't growl. He simply stood, eyes locked on Ethan's tail, still a living boundary. Logan arrived seconds later, voice firm but controlled. "That's enough." Ethan's gaze flicked from Logan to Rex, and something shifted. The anger lost its footing. He stepped back muttering, then turned and fled down the street. Mrs. Brooks slid down the car door, breath shallow. Logan crouched, speaking softly while Rex remained beside her, head lowered, presence steady. Mrs. Brooks reached out trembling and rested her hand on Rex's shoulder. "Good boy," she whispered, tears streaking her lined face. Word traveled faster than Logan expected. By evening, Sarah Mitchell brought over a casserole just in case you didn't feel like cooking, her eyes shining with quiet pride as she scratched Rex behind the ear. Mark Reynolds stopped by with an old leather collar he'd saved from his canine days at the station. Even children who'd once crossed the street now waited for Rex to pass, giggling when he ignored them with dignified restraint. Logan felt the shift like pressure easing in his chest. Rex wasn't just healing. He was becoming something the street needed. That night a sudden clap of thunder echoed from the hills, out of season and sharp. Logan froze mid-step, breath catching the familiar tightening, threatening to take hold. Rex reacted instantly, pressing against Logan's leg, grounding him with solid warmth. Logan rested his hand on Rex's neck, fingers sinking into thick fur, breathing slowly until the sound faded back into memory. He knelt then, forehead briefly touching Rex's. "You did good today," he said. Rex's tail thumped once, restrained but proud. As Logan locked the door and turned out the lights, he understood something he hadn't before. He hadn't just brought Rex into his home. He'd brought him into a community. And in doing so, Rex had claimed a role Logan himself had never been able to fill, not as a weapon, not as a shield, but as a quiet guardian. Outside, the street lay still beneath the stars, unaware that it had just named its newest hero. Early spring rain fell cold and steady over Spokane, turning last winter's grit into dark rivulets along the curbs and leaving the neighborhood smelling of wet earth and metal. Logan Pierce had learned the sound of rain, the way he learned everything else, by cataloging it. Yet this morning it unsettled him, drumming too close to memory. He moved through the house with quiet precision, boots by the door, keys on the hook, coffee untouched. Rex watched from the hallway, his posture alert but relaxed, shoulders filled out now, coat thick and clean, the line of his spine confident. At nearly 3 years old, Rex had grown into his frame power, balanced with restraint, amber eyes bright and assessing. He followed Logan outside without being called, reins stippling his back tail, low and calm, the air making him attentive in a way Logan recognized as readiness rather than anxiety. The siren came before the smoke, a thin wail, distant at first, then closer, echoing between houses. Rex stopped mid-step, ears cutting forward, nose lifting. Logan felt the change in the dog before he saw anything else. 2 houses down the old duplex near the alley coughed gray into the rain. Logan broke into a run, reflex carrying him faster than thought, Rex surging alongside without pulling. At the curb stood Caleb Morgan, a man in his early 30s with a lean build and a carpenter's hands, knuckles nicked and scarred from honest work. His hair was sandy blonde, plastered to his forehead by rain, his face pale with shock. "My mom's inside," he said, voice cracking, eyes fixed on the doorway like it might swallow him next. "She can't move fast, her knee." He didn't finish. Logan didn't ask questions. He did what he had always done, he assessed. The door was ajar, smoke thickening low. Rex moved first, stopping at the threshold, body angled, nose working. Logan caught the subtle shift. Rex wasn't charging in. He was measuring heat and wind. "Find," Logan said softly, not a command so much as permission. Rex slipped inside, low and sure, disappearing into the gray. Logan followed, shirt over his mouth, counting steps, tracking the change in air pressure. The living room was chaos: overturned chair, a lamp down, smoke pooling. From the back bedroom came a cough, weak and stubborn. On the bed lay Margaret Morgan, late 60s, small-framed, with a runner's legs gone soft at the knee. Her silver hair braided tight, as if order itself could keep fear at bay. Her eyes were sharp, despite the smoke, fixed on Rex as he appeared at her side, placing his body between her and the encroaching heat. He nudged her hand, firm but gentle. Logan reached her seconds later, lifting her with careful force, feeling the tremor in his arms, not from weight but urgency. Rex moved ahead, clearing the path, stopping once when a beam crackled overhead, waiting until the danger passed. Outside, rain hissed against heat as Logan set Margaret down on the wet grass. She clutched his sleeve, breath ragged, then turned to Rex, fingers burying in his fur. "Good boy," she said, voice shaking into a smile. Fire engines arrived in a rush of red and white. Lieutenant Dana Alvarez stepped off the first truck, a woman in her early 40s with a compact, athletic build and a face carved by years of command, sharp cheekbones, dark eyes that missed nothing. Her hair was pulled into a severe bun beneath her helmet, rain streaking her jacket. She took in the scene with a single glance, nodding once at Logan, then crouched to assess Margaret. "You did right," she said, calm and clipped. Her eyes flicked to Rex, who sat beside Margaret like a sentry. "Dog, too," she added, a corner of her mouth lifting. Caleb stood shaking in the rain until Sarah Mitchell appeared with a blanket, wrapping it around Margaret's shoulders. Her own coat soaked through her face, steady and kind. The fire was contained, the damage heavy but survivable. As hoses coiled and engines idled, neighbors gathered in small knots, voices, low awe, threaded through them. Someone started calling Rex guardian, half joking, half serious. Rex accepted none of it. He stayed where he was needed, eyes tracking movement, body quiet. When a loud pop sounded as a window gave way, Logan felt the familiar clamp in his chest, the narrowing that came before memory. Rex sensed it instantly, pressing his flank into Logan's leg. Wait, deliberate breathing, slow. Logan grounded himself on that presence, hand resting at Rex's collar, the rain cooling his skin. He exhaled. The world widened again. Later, when the street emptied and the rain softened to a whisper, Logan walked Rex home through puddled light. He noticed how people looked at the dog now, not with curiosity, but trust. At the door, Logan paused, hand on the knob, aware of the line they had crossed together. Rex sat, patient, eyes lifted. Logan knelt, meeting that gaze. "You chose this," he said quietly. Rex's tail thumped once, controlled, as if agreeing to a duty he had already assumed. Inside, Logan dried Rex with an old towel, the ritual unhurried. He understood something then that training had never taught him. Heroism wasn't the noise of arrival. It was the discipline of staying. And in the steady hush after fire, rain, and sirens, Logan knew the neighborhood would never see Rex as a rescued dog again. They would see him as the one who stood where danger decided to pass. Spring arrived without ceremony, the kind that sneaks in on softened light, and birds testing the air with tentative songs. In Spokane, the street woke one morning to puddles instead of ice, to the smell of damp soil and thawing leaves, and to a German shepherd sitting tall at the corner like he had always belonged there. Rex's coat shone now black, deep as ink along his back, tan bright and clean at the chest and legs, his muscles defined beneath healthy weight. At just over 3 years old, he moved with an easy confidence, neither restless nor rigid. A balance Logan Pierce recognized as readiness at peace with itself. Logan had changed too. He still rose before dawn, still kept his house spare and orderly, but the edges had softened. His posture no longer carried the constant forward lean of anticipation. He slept longer, not always through the night, but long enough to wake without the old pressure behind his eyes. He wore a trimmed beard, now salt beginning to show at the chin, the look of a man who had stopped fighting every mirror. On the morning of the block gathering, he stood on his porch in a clean flannel shirt, sleeves rolled, watching neighbors set up folding tables. He hadn't planned to host anything. The street had decided for him. Sarah Mitchell arrived first, her brown hair loose today, catching the light in warm strands, her pale skin kissed pink by the sun. She carried a basket of rolls balanced easily on her hip, moving with the calm competence of someone who had learned how to hold grief without letting it spill. She smiled at Logan, not wide but real. "You look rested," she said, as if it were a quiet victory. Logan nodded, not trusting himself to explain. Rex trotted over and sat at her feet, accepting a scratch behind the ear like a gentleman receiving applause he didn't need. By midday, the street filled. Mark Reynolds set up a grill, his broad shoulders working with practiced ease, joking with the kids, while keeping an eye on the propane like an old habit that never quite leaves. Mrs. Helen Brooks sat wrapped in a light cardigan, her silver hair pinned neatly, laughing, as Caleb Morgan adjusted a chair for her, his lean frame no longer tight with worry. Lieutenant Dana Alvarez stopped by, off-duty, hair loose now, jeans and boots replacing her uniform, her watchful eyes softer but still sharp. She crouched to greet Rex, who met her calmly, tail swaying once. "Good to see you on a quiet day," she said, and meant it for both of them. A new face hovered at the edge of the gathering, uncertain. Eli Turner stood with his hands in his pockets, a man in his late 20s, tall and narrow-shouldered, dark curls falling into his eyes. His skin was pale from too many indoor nights, his jaw shadowed by a beard he hadn't quite decided to keep. He worked nights at the grocery warehouse and kept mostly to himself, known for avoiding crowds since a car accident years ago left him cautious of noise and sudden motion. Rex noticed him immediately approaching, not head-on, but at an angle, stopping a few feet away and sitting. Eli froze, then exhaled. "Hey," he said softly, surprised at the steadiness of his own voice. Rex waited. After a moment, Eli knelt and rested his hand on the grass, letting Rex bridge the space. When the dog leaned in, Eli laughed short, incredulous, and something loosened in his shoulders. The moment that sealed the day came quietly. A loud bang cracked from a dropped grill lid, sharp enough to startle birds into the air. Logan felt the familiar tightening begin, the reflexive draw inward. Rex moved to his side without urgency, pressing his flank against Logan's leg, breathing slow. Logan matched it. Across the yard, Eli flinched, then steadied as Rex's calm seemed to ripple outward. Sarah noticed and smiled to herself, understanding the language of small mercies. Later, as the sun dipped and the street glowed amber, a simple plaque was unveiled. Nothing official, just a piece of wood Mark had carved and sealed himself. Neighborhood Guardian. Someone had painted a paw print beside the words. Rex sat, ears perked, head tilted, unimpressed but attentive. Logan cleared his throat. "He didn't come trained," he said, voice low, carrying. "He learned because he was allowed to stay." He looked down at Rex, then back at the faces before him. So did I. There was laughter, gentle and approving, and no one asked him to say more. When the tables were folded and the last cups stacked, Logan and Rex walked the length of the street together. Lights came on in windows like patient stars. At the corner, Logan paused, hand resting at Rex's collar, feeling the solid warmth there. He thought of the sign by the bus station, of a choice made on a cold day that had led them here. "We're home," he said, not as a statement, but as a promise. That night, Logan slept with the window-cracked spring air moving softly through the room. Rex lay at the foot of the bed, head on paws, eyes half-lidded but aware. Somewhere down the street, laughter drifted and faded. The world did not become perfect. It became kinder. And in that kindness, a man and a dog found the quiet happiness of belonging, chosen, earned, and shared. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with thunder or fire from the sky. Sometimes God sends them quietly on four tired paws, in the shape of a second chance, or in the courage to stop when everyone else walks past. What changed this street was not strength alone, but compassion chosen on an ordinary day. In our own lives, we are given the same choice again and again to open a door to listen to help without needing applause. When we do, God works through the small, faithful acts, through patience, kindness, and the willingness to stay. If this story touched your heart, let it move beyond the screen. Share it with someone who may need hope today. Leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel for more stories of love, loyalty, and redemption. May God bless you and your home place, peace in your heart, strength in your days, and loving companions on your path. Wherever life finds you, may you never walk alone.